I'm Nix. I am one of the players of MSCM. I don't really like listening to myself talk, but I thought it would be fun to make a video anyway. Going over some of the cards in Animus Vox and Theros Triumphant that I think are pretty interesting. So congratulations to Pipsqueak, and I can't pronounce your name. It starts with Brotane or something. It has muscle things. I say muscle person in my head because I imagine that you are incredibly strong and well built, unlike myself. So yeah, just a reminder that these cards are still subject to change before they are released to the public, blah blah blah, and yeah, whatever the council does in the background to decide these changes. These are just cards that I think are eye-catching or interesting and potentially have play around or constructive value. I'm going to start with some combo cards in a card with combo potential in On Repeat. It can blink a card over and over again, and because it returns immediately, you can do this multiple times in a single turn if you discard enough land cards. I don't see the full combo, but it's possible that there is something lying somewhere, and someone is just waiting to build it. Next is One Last Mission. This card's not very interesting, but I think it just provides just enough stats to potentially see play in some sort of aggressive white build. Going on is Hunters of Nebulas. I think this is some sort of control win condition. It being flash speed and hexproof, meaning it's hard to remove, could be pretty hard to deal with for a lot of decks. In addition, if it untaps, it's possible that paying 3 mana and not remaining card advantage neutral is effective enough to just control the rest of the game. Next is into Dire Straits. It feels like a second RFE. A lot of people have pointed out in Dire Straits already. It honestly, in my opinion, feels more powerful than RFE because when you bring it back, you have so many more bodies than RFE, and it becomes a win condition in itself. It might be a little slower than RFE, but it does come in the form of it does return in the form of reconstruct, which does allow you to sacrifice a permanent and make it cheaper. Sounds of Silence, I think, is just a massively efficient card draw that also doubles that burn potential. Again, it's not particularly interesting. It's just pure stats, and it's might be efficient enough to fit along some sort of mono black list alongside cards like Wave of Decay and Oryx Spellweaver. Next is Exposed. I'm actually would be surprised if this does not see play anywhere. It's potentially the most consistent hand disruption card in the format, and stands competitive with other 1-mana discards like Payop and Duress. And when the deck lists are when you have open deck lists like we do in GPs, you probably will be able to hit a card that is meaningful in your matchup all the time. Unfortunately, it does seem a little bit weaker in League, where you do not know where your opponent is running, so when it's turn 1 and you have an untapped black source, you don't necessarily want to play Exposed because you don't know where your opponent is running. Next is Kill This Love. I might be Kobe a little bit. This is a personal favorite card of mine from the set. It enters the battlefield, acts as an edict, and can gain you life multiple times. Unfortunately, I do think it might just be overshadowed by Villainy in any single deck that wants to run a 3-mana enchantment, but the difference is that Villainy does require 3 black, and this could be run in a more general control deck list, and Villainy doesn't actually do anything when it hits the field, so it can be more efficiently responded to with certain removal spells. Anyway, going on, we have Skytouch Distorter. It's a effective sideboard piece that could disrupt certain fetch decks or certain tutor decks that really need to find their one solution to whatever problem you're causing. I do think that it's not particularly durable in that it is just a 2/1 body, and it could just be removed, but currently white does not have a 2-mana permanent that has this sort of effect, so yeah, maybe just for sideboard. Next, Ataraxia is probably another terrifying sideboard card in that when it hits the field, it can possibly just immediately win you the game, because non-basic lands not untapping means that certain decks will just not be able to untap for the rest of the game. Furthermore, the creature disruption is effective against creature decks, so Ataraxia does have a pretty wide reach in what it can shut down. I honestly don't really like this card because it wins in a way that is sort of uninteractive and might promote some uninteresting gameplay loops where you cast Ataraxia, the game is effectively over, but you haven't won yet because you're slowly grinding away and chipping down your opponent while your opponent can't actually play the game. Moving on to Theros Triumphant, I want to keep this as short as possible, is Protein Jar. It just drops +1/+1 counters on pretty much every single tribal card you play. It's definitely a staple in any single tribal deck that comes out. In addition, it can also act as a 3-mana clone, and just be your best creature, which is pretty good in itself. Furthermore, it has some potential in a combo deck, such as Warrior Krats, where you have the persist combo of sacrificing a creature, it coming in with a -1/-1 counter, you putting a +1/+1 counter in to cancel the -1/-1 counter, and just looping that over and over. Next is Grandeur of Nyx. I don't think it's a particularly interesting card, but it does work well in the sort of all enchantments build, where you can play Grandeur of Nyx and then you can have perfect draws for the rest of the game effectively. Also, you can play the 2-mana creature tutor, I don't remember its name. It's some sort of mouse from Road to Kapamaru, and you could swing with it you could play on turn 2, swing with it on turn 3, play Grandeur of Nyx, and be effectively set for the rest of the game. Next is Karametra. I think this is just a purely good value card. You could search your library, you could get lands, you could play those lands as well, and ramp out really quickly. There's a certain ramp player out there who plays highly overpowered linear decks made by purple, who is very interested in this card, and I am as well. Keranos, the go-to comparison with Keranos for me is Halcyon Days. It allows you to get a ton of value and a ton of card advantage whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, and ideally you're running a lot of those. Keranos just hits the board. If you have a chance to untap, you could potentially lock out your opponent for the rest of the game. Also, it has the backup plan of just being a 5/4 swinging body, just like Karametra, although I'm not particularly worried about that aspect since red and blue doesn't really have that many permanents to play with. Fatefire is just a decent 3-mana 2 damage AoE with an alternate effect that could also be decent in certain situations. Personally, I think it can see some interesting play in some sort of Fireweaver deck where you just run this in sideboard, or in some sort of deck with Cosmic Coalescing, since this technically only has a converted mana cost of 1. Next is Torch of Phoenix Fire. This in particular might be pretty good in some sort of Seto-san deck, where you just am able to run a Lightning Bolt despite not playing red, and that alone might just be decent enough to play it. It makes your colors a little bit easier, and yeah. Cinderhoof Minotaur is a card that a lot of people also have their eyes on. It's very similar to Rakiri Dissident, but it also contains a miniature Ragavan strategy where you can just get out threats with of higher mana value than other players would otherwise expect. Also, 2-mana 3/2 Trample is nothing to scoff at either. This is a card that I cannot pronounce, Enopraxia's Endeavor. I think it is an alternative to a sideboard card of Memento Mori, where you exile your opponent's graveyard, but also has the alternative possibilities of being removal or returning cards to your hand. It might function in a similar way to Sean Jun's command, where it is just that widely effective in multiple cases, and you can run it in a lot of main decks. Cave of Pleonexa is just perhaps the best reactive spot removal land effect land in the game. It's not Wasteland, but it's almost there in that you can just destroy an Animus or whatever threatening land is on the field for only 1 mana and tapping it. Being how effective it is, I think you'll see quite a bit of constructed play. Although it is still competitive to Mirror Gate, and it really depends on your personal preference between Mirror Gate and Cave of Pleonexia. I think this will be better in I think this will be better in more aggressive decks if you want to get mana on curve. Ignore Requiem. They ask me questions all the time. I say hi, and yeah, whatever. Anyway, Shrine to Nykthos is the last card. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, Shrine to Me is the last card. I've heard rumors about it in Pioneer. It's probably pretty good. Yeah. Okay, bye. That's me. That's done. As a reminder, these cards are not final. They're still subject to change before they're open in MSCM. And yeah.